So I had lunch with Michael and I said, be kind, be brief, be quick, and he violated all of that. Thank you for that very generous introduction. He's one of the leaders in the field of philanthropy, but don't ever have him introduce you. I remember that old story. Somebody was giving a eulogy for a woman's husband, and she looked over to her youngest kid and said, "Junior, go look in the casket and make sure they're talking about your daddy." So I don't know who that person was, but thank you. I also want to thank Valita and the planning committee generally, but I've gotten to know Valita over a few years, and she has brought new energy, not simply to your community, but really nationally. She has breathed new life into people thinking and talking about African American giving. So Valita, thank you, and thank you for this opportunity. Now, it's special for me to be here today. And I was thinking, my roots with this place and this initiative goes back 17 years. So when it was at its infancy, when a group of you were sitting around a small table, you asked me to come and have a conversation, and those folk aren't part of the new generation anymore. They're the old generation. But they were once, as was I, and Daryl, Lester, Nathan, Lindsay, and Eric Law, and the group of us. I remember that time, and I don't think any of us thought that we'd be in a room like this, filled with people, supported now by the Foundation for the Carolinas today, in a way that love was not present back then. Yep. And I'm just here to say my truth. I went to Israel once, and they said Emmett means truth in Hebrew. Okay, I came home and I told Jackie, my wife, I said, "You're about to hear the truth." She said, "Your truth doesn't mean the truth." So you're going to hear Emmett's truth tonight. The other part that's special is that Black History Month was an independent invention started by my wife 4 years ago. And if I am one of the foremost scholars around African American giving, she is one of the foremost scholars around African diaspora giving. And so she, with others, Valita and other groups, really put their heart and soul. And so it's special to me to hear that city council recognition and to hear her name as part of it, and to say that's what she owns. And she's coming later in the year, and you'll see she's much better at this than I am. So I want to do three things tonight. I want to talk about Black philanthropy's past. I want to talk about its present. I want to talk about its future. And I want to use this theme called "What's Community Got to Do with It?" Stated differently, because that's a nice way of putting it, what's community got to do with it? Are we African Americans with a collective sense of destiny, or have we become Americanized Africans and individuals? Uh-oh, I saw the shoulders do like that. Uh-oh, I'm just getting started. So just, I don't want to offend anybody, and if I do, I'm on a plane in the morning. Don't worry about it. But that's really what I want to talk about for our past, our present, and our future. And I want to introduce what I mean by Black philanthropy. So, around the world, Black is a unifying thing, and I know this is about here and around the world. But tonight, when I use Black, I'm talking about homegrown African Americans, used to be colored, Negro, And now we're African American. But that's when I say black philanthropy, that's who I'm talking about tonight. You with me? All right. I want to introduce this concept that a guy by the name of David Matthews 20 years ago introduced called public power. And when he talked about public power, he said public power is the ability of philanthropy, the giving of money, time, talent, to affect public decisions. And he said that was public power. And later, Ambassador Jim Joseph, who some of you know, had a similar concept, and he talked about the soft power of philanthropy to influence and to make change. Now, I love Jim, but I like the phrase public power. So I'm going to talk about public power. I'm going to engage in some honest talk. That's hard to do. People like to put labels on folk. My own label is I think I'm a progressive, but you may think I'm a conservative. That's okay. We've got to start to have honest conversation. And we've got to have honest conversation regardless who's in the room listening. Right? So that's my promise to you, is to try to have honest conversation. Your promise to me is just because it's your truth doesn't mean it's the truth. Okay? All right, everybody's quiet now. All right? So 25 years ago, I started writing about this thing called black philanthropy. 25 years ago. A long time. Somebody said, ooh, didn't look that over. Somebody said, yes, he does. And at that time, black philanthropy was an oxymoron. The idea that black and give could be in the same phrase. I spent all of my time going around the country, giving speeches, explaining to people we had this rich, deep tradition in the African American community. I would try to explain, how in the world do you think we survived? Through slavery, through Jim Crow, if we didn't do things for ourselves? Because the broader community wasn't helping out. So it had to be us. It had to be black folk. Black folk putting small dollar amounts together for their collective self-interest. That's what the Underground Railroad was. They raised money. They raised money in the U.S. They raised money internationally for the Underground Railroad. People who were conductors were volunteers, putting their lives on the line. Escaping slaves, they let stay in their homes, they clothed them. What do you think that was? It's black philanthropy. Right? And yet, this thing that helped our entire survival, that provided our socio-economic framework. Black philanthropy helped start the first black banks, the first insurance companies, the first schools. Tell me, how did black philanthropy start the first insurance companies? The burial societies of the churches. Because everybody wanted to make sure they get buried properly. And so they start making that monthly contribution through the church so that they could get buried. And that became the basis of the first insurance companies. Black philanthropy. Through the churches. Collective. Rubbing pennies and nickels and dimes together. And then came the Civil War. And we got emancipated. It was separate but equal. And what did we turn to? Black philanthropy. Black philanthropy created the schools. Black philanthropy funded the nonprofit infrastructure of that time, teaching newly freed slaves how to read, how to write. Black philanthropy. So we didn't get the 40 acres and a mule. It's black philanthropy. And when it came time to say separate could never be equal, what did we turn to? Black philanthropy. What was the civil rights movement? They didn't get grants from the Ford Foundation. Think about it. I want you to stop and just take it in. SCLC, NAACP, Student Organizing Committee, Black Panther Party, Nation of Islam. Where'd they get their money from? Where'd the Freedom Riders stay overnight? Who gave them meals? Who gave them a place to sleep? Black philanthropy, public power, created the mood for Brown versus Board of Education. Black philanthropy, public power, created the Voting Rights Act 1965. That's where we come from. Right? And the people who were wealthy, Madam C.J. Walker, first independent black millionaire woman, when she did her philanthropy to create schools in southern towns, she put up half the money. She'd tell the local community, you put up the other half. It's a collective. And she understood that we had to have buy-in. What did community have to do with it back then? Community had everything to do with it back then. You with me? All right, because it's about to get rough. It's about to get rough. Let me find my place here. Now, let's move to the present. Let's talk about the people in this room. Because I don't think many of you were around for the Underground Railroad. Some of you were here for the Civil Rights Movement. You're that transition group. But the rest of us, I wasn't there then. I can't claim any of that history. I can talk about now. What have we been doing now? Got a 2-term African-American black president. We have Fortune 500 business leaders, African-American, head of American Express. We've got athletes and entertainers and rap stars and few even foundation presidents. But we're a long way from equal, and we're a long way from a post-racial society. Long way. But we also have to say things have never, you didn't hear me. Things have never, ever been better in terms of socio-economic progress for the African American community than it is today. It's just a historical fact. I can hold both those things in my mind at the same time. We're not where we need to be, or where we ought to be, or where we should be, but we are a lot better off than we've ever been before. By every statistical measure, you saw some of them at the beginning, nobody raised their hands that I saw. But black philanthropy has never been more robust than it is today. Almost every athlete has either a private foundation, a donor-advised fund, a nonprofit that they started, something. Every entertainer is doing something. We're at a point where Oprah Winfrey's generosity is legendary. We're at a place where 2 rappers can drop $70 million on the University of Southern California. Dr. Dre and Alavine, I don't know these folks. I listen to different music. $70 million. One cheer. You go do it. Make it happen. And yet, with all the wealth we have, there's estimated that we have some 35,000 African American millionaires. Now that's less than 1/10 of 1% of the African American population. Put that aside for a second. 35,000 millionaires, more millionaires than we've ever had before. So we got wealth in our community. And at the same time, our institutions, African American institutions, are on life support financially. They're on life support. Our historically black colleges are in danger. Show my age, that old, Lost in Space. Danger, Will Robinson, danger. Okay, with the robot doing this thing. Since some of you know what I'm talking about. That's where we are. National NAACP in danger. National Urban League in danger. In danger. At a time by where every statistical measure, black philanthropy is thriving. And we ask the question, what does community have to do with it? Apparently, not much. So then we ask the question, because I'm a scholar. Might be okay that people are doing their own thing. It might be if the outcomes of our community are the same statistically as every other community. If we look like everybody else, then maybe okay, we ought to act with our philanthropy like everybody else. Now when I say everybody else, I mean the white community. That's right, that's the dominant community. So, let's ask the question, how is our community doing right now, today, in the present? So back in 1967, in a book called Where Do We Go From Here, Dr. Martin Luther King made this statement: of the good things in life, the Negro has approximately 1/2 that of whites. Of the bad things of life, he has twice that of whites. That's what he wrote in 1967. That's before we overcame. That's before the post-racial society got here. So let's look at our collective status today. African American infants are twice as likely as whites to die before their first birthday. Diabetes is the 4th leading cause of death among African Americans. Today, nearly half, 48% of all African American boys drop out of high school, and 42% of all black boys have failed an entire grade at least once. Oh, it gets worse, sister. It gets worse. I'm just getting going. It gets worse. African American boys are 3 times more likely than white boys to be suspended or expelled from school. And if you add in Latino boys, represents nearly 80% of the youth in special education. And I say if you add in Latinos because Latinos can be black or white. But see, we didn't cut it all up all kind of ways. Right? In 2010, African American men accounted for 70% of all new HIV infections among adults and adolescents, which is 7 times the rate of white men. It is estimated that in their lifetimes, a total of 1 in 16 African American men and 1 in 32 African American women will be infected with HIV. It is estimated that 1 in 6 African American men have been incarcerated and 1 in 100 African American women are in prison. Nearly half of the total prison population consists of African Americans. Prison is the new slavery and has become the unspoken economic development engine for rural America. African Americans account for nearly 49% of all homicide victims in the United States. They're usually men and boys, and 93% of them were killed by another African American male. The poverty rate of African Americans is 27%, compared to 9.8% for white Americans. The median household income of African Americans is 61% of that of white Americans, roughly $32,229 compared to $55,420. The African American community is an endangered species. We are an endangered species. Despite at a time when black philanthropy has never been better, our community is dying. And the question that we have to ask is what those beautiful singers, are they in this room? Are they still here? Because they took me to church when they were singing. Thank you. True to our God, true to our native land. That's the question. Because the people in this room are going to be okay. The people in I see, I find. You don't see yourselves. I see you. You look good tonight. You're going to be okay. And the people you know, you and yours, going to be okay. But you and yours, in the collective, that's about to die. So we're left with a place today that we're not the collective. Got more money than ever before, more talent, more resources, more networks. But it's about our individual giving today. It's not about our collective giving today. And I'm not saying we all got to do the same thing, but not enough of us are doing any of the same things to matter for our community. It's just where we are. So let's talk about the future. Because right now, the past, let's go back to the past. I'm messing up something. The past, we were centered in the church. Civil rights movement, we had people like Dr. King and Ralph Abernathy and Fred Shuttlesworth. Today, we have preachers in LA. That's where we are. That's the symbol. Where we are. It used to be about all of us, now it's about me. I got an iPod, I got an iPad. I got my playlist. I'm with me. And so the future is about, are we African Americans or have we become Americanized Africans? The future is, does community have something to do with it? Or does community have nothing to do with it? And we don't have time to take a long time to come up with this answer. Because institutions are dying and going away now. It's just where it is. We have a collective decision to have to make. Had 37 million African Americans. We live in a time, and I come from a place where social media and crowdsourcing are important tools for mobilization. And if people in some of the most repressive governments in the world can use social media and overthrow the whole apple cart, we can't use social media in the freest nation in the world to organize, to use crowdsourcing. If just one day a month we could agree on a cause or an organization and get 37 million people to give $1, once a month, our community would give $37 million. We could do something about the illiteracy rate in our community. We could do something about the lack of gun control that is literally killing our communities. We could do something about some racist stand-your-ground laws. We can't do that as individuals. We can do that with the technology that we have and a sense of collective purpose for our community. What's community got to do with it? It's got everything to do with it if we're to survive. We can reach out to our friends who are not part of our community institutionally and individually, but we have to be in charge of our destiny. We have the money, we have the smarts, and we better make the time. Thank you very much. Thank you.